Hello, welcome to my channel. Today, rather than doing a video, I figured I might as well do a short rant on my thoughts about the current election and Christianity, specifically Christianity and support for Donald Trump, or at least a majority of Christians here in the United States. This is a really complicated issue and one that's fascinated both sociologists, economists, psychologists, and theologians alike. In trying to explain this phenomenon, Christians are rallying behind Donald Trump in large numbers, and while I agree that there are Christians on both sides of the fence, Christians supporting Hillary, Christians supporting Bernie Sanders, Christians supporting third-party candidates, a large number of quote-unquote Christians, at least statistically, do fall, or those who would consider themselves Christians, support Donald Trump. Part of the purpose of this video is to maybe explain or get at some of the reasons why I think that's the case. And I recognize that, a lot of people have different thoughts on it. I'm sharing mine. Hopefully it informs yours, or that at least to start this conversation as to why Christians are supporting Donald Trump. And so today I'll just be focusing on the culture wars that I think played a big part in why Christians feel disenfranchised, why there's this victim complex within most Christians today where they feel like they're persecuted, they feel like they're losing their space, and to a degree, I wouldn't say 100%, but certainly to a degree they're right. So today's video will focus on that. This video will be split into 3 parts. The first is Christians losing their cultural capital in academia. The second is Christians losing their cultural capital in entertainment industry or Hollywood, however you want to think about it. And 3, which I think was the nail in the coffin, which just happened last year, Christians losing court cases. And so the first one, Christians in academia, you'd have to go back to the 90s when Christians were antagonized as being very anti-intellectual, and in many ways rightfully so, because Christians value revelation. You could argue this goes back all the way to the Scopes trial. This goes all the way back to the 1800s when Darwinism and biblical criticism came about. But historically in America, Christianity has almost always been seen as anti-intellectual. And myself being a Christian, my argument for that would be, well, it's because we value revelation so much. And so around the 90s, when you look at most university departments, almost all the professors are atheists, ranging from the art department to the humanities, through the sciences, and a lot of that really comes from this strong adherence to Enlightenment ideals in university. My professor shared with me, and I recognize this is anecdotal evidence, but it's still valuable to get a sense for how academia operated. My professor did his PhD at Harvard, and he did his master's degree in a university in Israel. Upon sort of getting accepted into Harvard, one of the questions that his advisors or his interviewers asked him was, "Are you enlightened?" Knowing that he was an evangelical Christian, and he was interested in the fact that they would ask that question, but I think it's really telling. What they meant by enlightened was, do you adhere to the principles of enlightenment, not being biased, or at least holding to secular ideas? And perhaps part of it too is being skeptical of religion, or at least being cognizant of how religion biases us and that secularism doesn't bias us. And so this is the perspective from the professor's side of things. And so imagine being a student taught in a university where religious ideologies are deemed wrong, dangerous, not contributing at all to the discussions, or at least to the intellectualism of university setting, and then going back home and your parents recognizing that, universities change the way you think about the world, in many ways endanger your faith, which is still present in many parents' minds today, where if you were to send your child to university, you risk your child losing his or her faith, not because of reason or not because the university's adherence to Enlightenment ideas convince the individual that it's right, but rather because it's very militant in its approach, so much so that any echo of religiosity would be deemed not in accordance with what's expected, and therefore the professors can grade people down for echoing religious sentiments and stuff like that. To be fair, there is a reason for that, because again, I think as I said, historically, Christians have valued revelation over intellectualism. And so it's only fairly recently that Christians realize that they have to gain intellectual capital in academia. And Mark Knoll, historian at Notre Dame, wrote, I think fairly past decade, The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind, in which he makes the argument that for the evangelical, there really isn't much of a mind. And again, there's a lot of movements trying to move away from that. So think about academia. Academia has created this space where Christianity is not welcome, may not be welcome, and seminarians or people who graduated with degrees from Christian colleges feel like they can't penetrate that. And then let's add on top of that the growing influence of new atheists around the mid-2000s after the September 11 attacks. A lot of people were really starting to question religion's influence on the minds and lives of individuals, specifically those of the individuals who crashed the planes into the World Trade Center, being motivated by sociopolitical as well as religious intentions. But again, this gave a lot of new atheists a platform to be able to echo their thoughts on the matter, which consists of saying, well, religion is dangerous. Historically, religion has only caused problems for individuals, and the good works done by a lot of Christians occurs in spite or happens in spite of their religiosity, that it was their humanistic tendencies that are constantly fighting against their primal religious sentiments. And think of this environment, right, where new atheists are speaking out against Christians, academia is still strongly anti-Christian, and then the development of the internet in its infancy was also to a degree strongly anti-Christian, because a lot of the individuals who delved there or who were very tech savvy weren't exactly religious either, and this was an opportunity for them to really express their feeling like they don't belong in a community because they are surrounded by Christians, and to a degree it's a fair assessment, right? A lot of these individuals who found the internet are in places where the internet became sort of a second community apart from their present community, and a lot of atheists are sort of sparsely spread around the United States, and so the internet became their medium to express sort of their sentiments and ideas. And so when Christians started going into the internet, when Christians started to delve into spaces like YouTube, there they were sort of laggards in terms of cultural capital. And so, summarizing it, in academia, strongly secular, new atheists were also starting to weaken Christian influence. And then the internet was sort of a space that, for most Christians entering the space later on, felt like it was very hostile to Christianity. And so, this goes into our second section, which is the entertainment industry, which really starts with Hollywood. I remember two movies that really exemplify this anti-Christian sentiment. The first is the Da Vinci Code, and the second is that movie by, name of the movie is Bruce Almighty, showing sort of the two strands of which Hollywood's approach Christianity, either one, debunking it, or two, mocking it. And then you also have TV shows like South Park and Family Guy making fun of Christianity. They parody religious ideas, where in South Park, Satan is portrayed as a homosexual who sleeps with Saddam Hussein, which many Christians might find sacrilegious. So you have all of these cultural mediums speaking out against Christianity. And on top of that, you also have cultural icons like Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, making fun of Christianity, and they grew in their popularity probably because they spoke out against the hegemony of Christianity. And then along with them, Bill Maher came about as well. And then when YouTube came about, you had a lot of popular YouTubers that really spoke out against Christianity. And so what you have here are academia and the entertainment industry both trying to diminish Christian influence in the public sphere. In defense of their positions, it's not entirely, or rather their criticisms of Christianity weren't ungrounded. Right, and in many ways, what a lot of professors are saying, Christianity wasn't intellectual, so therefore it wasn't conducive to the university environment, and to a degree that's true, and Christianity is still trying to repair itself from that. And in Hollywood, they do have this history of making fun of anything that's sacred. You can say that it's good that they're able to make fun of anything that's sacred, started, but then this next section I think is very important. When you think of academia, when you think of entertainment industry, you think that they're very leftist establishments. So let's move the timetable to more present state. At least the past 2 or 3 years, you see a lot of civil movements gaining ground, primarily the rise of feminism, the rise of gays' rights, transgenderism, and also Black Lives Matter, the racial component of all of this, which seem to have a lot of, from the Christianist perspective, a lot of these movements seem very similar, or they're almost like another religious movement in and of themselves, both in terms of how these ideas are disseminated through cultures, how they're discussed, and how they're assumed, how they become axioms, and the axiom being, social justice, right? It's funny because in the past 3-4 years, Christians came about and said, hey, we remember we were criticizing, we lost a lot of cultural capital in the early 2000s. Hollywood criticizing us for being authoritarian, a lot of people in academia criticizing us for being irrational, a lot of TV shows criticizing us for holding things too sacred, not being funny enough. Now there are these movements that to us seems irrational, that are authoritarian, and that are holding certain things like justice and race too sacred to be made fun of. We think it warrants criticism. And so they criticize these movements. Like, for example, they say feminism is very authoritarian. Of what a lot of people consider third wave feminism, it's sort of tainting the movement. So third wave feminism, and then you would look at movements like Black Lives Matter, where a lot of Christians would criticize it and say, well, individual agency is important. Like, you can't just completely say all cops are bad. But then the other side of it too is a lot of African Americans say, no, this has been the norm. This is like, cops have always treated us like this. This is why we need to start speaking out against it. But then a lot of the white Christians especially would say, no. That's not rational, though. There is a cultural component to it, and long story short, you need to change the culture of the community before placing blame on, I guess, a generalization. And so they would deem said movements as rational. And then the whole transgender thing, it's basically expecting everyone to like and support gay marriage when Christians felt like, whoa, I know we were authoritarian before, we expected no one to be gay, but now we're like, okay, well, fine, it's okay, just keep it in your own home, don't force anyone else to like it. But now you're forcing, from the Christian's perspective, you're forcing us to have to abide, you're forcing us to have to marry gay individuals, you're forcing us to have to service gay individuals when we would not otherwise want to, you're forcing us to issue, in the case of Mary Davis, to issue marriage licenses even though it goes against our conscience. So from the Christian perspective, all these movements from the left shows that there's a double standard. And it doesn't help that a lot of the popular icons, Hollywood and the cultural icons, support these movements, but don't seem to recognize that the things that they criticize Christianity for could be aptly applied to those movements as well. Perhaps because it's popular, because a lot of their audience support these movements, for whatever reason, for whatever political reason, that might be the cause. And then afterward, although actually when you look at the New Atheist movement, there is a lot of pushback, or at least the community seems to be torn too, in terms of whether they deem these civil movements as also being very authoritarian. I think half of the atheist community that I know of seems to be very wary of the religious undertones that are part of these movements. And so you see this divide between academia, between Christians and civil culture, or at least the left. But at its core, that there is this double standard. And I think the nail in the coffin really was last year's court decision, which is the Oberdell versus Hodges case. The case that allowed, on a national level, states to recognize gay marriage, both on a national and a state level. And I think this was the nail in the coffin because this was a battle that Christians have been fighting for a long time. And this is on the same level as the Scopes trial in demonstrating what a lot of people on the left would consider the regressive values of conservatism. But a lot of people on the right would argue that a lot of these movements, these authoritarian movements, are also quite regressive in their own right, but they're just not getting the same criticism. They argue that Black Lives Matter is rooted in irrational sentiments. They argue that the gay rights incident, especially having won this court case, is very authoritarian, and that you're forcing everyone to have to bake cakes for gay couples. You're forcing churches to have to marry them lest they be deemed or accused of hate crime, which there's no case example yet, but I mean that's certainly a fear that's still hanging over their heads. And I think they would level the same criticism with feminism, which is it's both authoritarian and irrational, and it's certainly holding gender too sacred. And so here we have the double standard. It's accurate to say Christians lost their voice in culture because of this double standard, and the left has surprisingly won the culture battle. And this is where Trump comes in, because while a lot of Christians recognize that he's not exactly Christian, or he doesn't really believe what a lot of Christians would believe, a lot of his supporters are sort of on the same boat as him. Christianity for them is a culture, it's not a belief, it's not an individual faith one carries, but nonetheless he's willing to protect that culture. He's willing to protect the communities that still value these things, that still value things like teaching creationism, like the importance of faith in school, allowing prayer in public schools, and all these other cultural practices. Donald Trump promises, at least as he tells them, that he will bring these things back, because it seems that Hollywood, it seems that academia aren't willing to give them that opportunity. And in the realm of politics, I think they've recognized that politics really is where change can take place, which is why they become much more militant on the right about it. So that's where I see Donald Trump being viewed as a strongman, as a savior of Christianity, because he's willing to be the authoritarian that they've always been looking for. And so this is, I think, one of the key pieces to why Christians turn to Donald Trump. It's that Trump's giving them the voice they lost a long time ago and giving them the representation that's been taken away from them. And if the left was originally concerned about equity and egalitarianism, then Christians never felt that once the left is taken over. And so this was their attempt, or at least their last stand, really, to regain the ground that they've lost in the past 20 years. But again, there are other components of this as well. There's the economic factor, there's the immigration factor, and those I think will hopefully tackle in the next two videos. But for now, I think just to leave you with a thought, the culture wars really is at the heart of Christian identity, because most of Christianity's concerns stem from culture and society. A lot of cultural Christians aren't too concerned with economics, aren't really too concerned with philosophy, aren't too concerned with foreign affairs and stuff like that, or interventions in the Middle East. Actually, in many ways, they do resonate with the left on those points, but really the social agenda is, I would say, one of the four most important factors, because that's what the pulpit can address, not the other sort of topics that would define the right, that would define conservatism. So yeah, these are my thoughts on the culture wars in Christianity, and I hope this video helps, and look forward to the next video I make about this.